Hello, Suzette.
Hello.
How's your night going?
Living life is going well as usual.
Are you out there living La Vida Loca?
Living la vida loca, living the
Oh, wait,
dream.
wait. Wait. What state are you in right now?
I'm in California.
Yeah, aren't you guys having like a statewide barbecue?
Oh, yeah, baby. Place on fire. Just
Wouldn't it be hilarious if the big one hit at the exact same time?
listen, I'm like, I might have beachfront property. I'm like, be
You
able
have
to
to
look
go
out
there.
of my apartment window and see the Pacific Ocean. This keeps up. So
Yeah, you're gonna start going to hang out with your relatives back down in the Caribbean.
listen, I'm like, I will be in this car and drive my happy ass to Panama and be okay. So I'm like, if nothing else, being an immigrant, you learn to keep your passport ready. So
Your passport.
just in case it pops off,
You never know. You never know.
you never do. You never do.
No, I have a lot of sympathy. I have relatives out in California, and California is one of those places I've visited many times,
Mhm.
and I genuinely don't like it. Let me rephrase that. I don't like Los Angeles. I
Lots
don't
of people
like
feel that way.
what
Lots of people feel that way, that they don't like LA proper.
it's a it's a it's one of those places where I don't know. It's too many people, too small an area. Everyone is just at war, figuratively and literally. The taxes are so high, and no one gets anything from their taxes. And it's one of the most overpopulated places on the planet. It's
So
really
my
sad.
experience of the state is a little different. I came from New York, so by comparison, you can't talk to me about crowds. Like like New York City, like listen. So for me, it's actually less populated, and I'm lucky enough that I have a lot of friends out here who are natives, who born and raised in the area, and it is a place that when you are born and raised, that like these nooks and crannies that make it a lot more enjoyable. For me, it's much more about the lifestyle and culture and laid back spirit that's out here. Taxes, like I said, coming from New York with the municipal, state, and city taxes, like I just kind of chalk that up to deuces. That's just the price you
Charge it
pay
to the
to
game. Well, listen, why don't you come hang out here in Brazil with me, and then we'll talk about quality of life for taxes. Sao Paulo,
sounds
Brazil,
sounds
for
like
those
a
who don't
plan.
know. Oh, by the way, good evening, Devin. Thank you for popping in to say hello. I'm looking forward to you being part of the discussion. And if you haven't, make sure you click the thumbs up and subscribe and all that because I have a lot of diverse people and things to talk about. Miss Witt, same to you. Thank you for taking time out of what must have been a busy day because everybody's busy to spend some time out here with me and a bunch of my knuckleheaded friends hanging out talking about whatever nonsense we feel like we need to unpack. And you know what? Before we go into what I want to unpack tonight, what I really want to dig into, we'll tell them who you are first and give them some background as to why your opinion carries weight. Because everybody has an opinion, but not everyone's opinion counts. Why does your opinion on this count?
So I had the privilege and luxury of, my name is Suzette Crichton, for those who don't know. I was trained as a clinical therapist. I started working, I've worked in healthcare my entire career, moved from being a practitioner into administration, and help hospitals and healthcare systems deal with issues of safety, of access. I'm responsible for regulatory compliance and being compliant with laws, managing liability, litigation. And so it has given me a very wide spectrum into healthcare, both on the patient's and also as a provider and then also as an administrator. So I got to see and experience what healthcare is like from all three perspectives, and I think that that has made me a very educated consumer when I am in the patient space, but it also allows me to have a lot of knowledge related to negotiating the healthcare system and negotiating access, and also being familiar with law, regulation, and how laws and regulations and social policies impact how we experience healthcare. So I kind of have a triple threat in that regard, because I can speak so intimately about all three of those avenues. So that gives me a little bit of weight.
Well, last time you were here, we had a really good discussion. And for those who don't know, we ended up having a great discussion on healthcare, the cost of healthcare, why it costs, what it costs. And you gave a very nuanced view, and you took a lot of people to task on who's responsible for what and why things cost what they cost. Now, I'm not saying that everybody had to agree with you, but all the feedback in the comments and everyone who even privately messaged me said that they're glad that I have people like you around who can talk about it without it being an argument. You know, while it's still something, because that's what I'm here for. I just like to talk. I just like to have a great conversation with people.
Absolutely.
And for the people who want to go back and watch that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to post here, not post here. I'm going to show you guys the conversation we had. I'm going to look it up and I'm going to share screen. While I'm doing that, you postulated a interesting thesis statement on abortion.
Yes.
And before we even go there, before people even see that, if anybody, after you're done watching this, something that you should definitely go look at Poverty Without Healthcare, Creating the Underclass. That was a classic.
That was a good conversation.
Well, here's what ended up happening. As the conversation waned, you said a few things, and I said, we're going to have to come back for that, and tonight is the night.
I hear you.
Can you just restate in as many words as you need, because the good thing about the internet is we've got the time. In as many words as you need, tell us what your thesis was on how abortion is being used, overused, underused. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I got you. So abortion has been a very emotionally laden and a point of contention in our country for several decades at this point. And I think that sometimes, because of all those feelings, we don't always take the step back to look at how access and how certain access and abilities to make your own decisions and have autonomy about your body, how that plays out in your social experience, your political experience, and etc. So for me, separate from the moral issue, because this is where I think that the argument gets derailed. If there is a group of people who believe that abortion is morally wrong and that it is equivalent to murder, and so their actions are tailored specifically to stop what they see as an egregious moral wrong, and I completely respect that place. The problem becomes when you take a moral perspective and you legislate it and or use access to public health or public resources to enforce that, and that you do it trying to divorce it from the history and the culture that has grown alongside that. And what I mean by that is, women have only controlled their fertility, consistently have consistent access for a very short time, okay, as far as birth control goes.
Well, what do you mean short time? What do you mean?
So what I mean is, prior to, let's say, the modern era, birth control was a hit or miss proposition. There were all, like, from the dawn of time, okay, prehistoric days, women have been trying to control fertility. Just from we woke up and realized that after a certain count of days, there was this thing, and if the thing didn't happen, a baby popped out. We've been trying to control fertility like that.
By a thing meaning when we learn to associate as a group of people, and more specifically, women learn to associate menstruation and their cycle with timing of a baby. For the people who are listening, the reason I sound like an old DJ right now is because spring has sprung in Sao Paulo, Brazil. The weather is beautifully warm, yet some cowards insist on air conditioning. And they turn the air conditioning so low that it's like you're living in an icebox. So whereas I'm walking around in my clever, physically appealing tank tops,
physically
when I walk in and I'm cold, so I have to actually keep a hoodie with me all the time.
Yeah, that AC is a killer.
Yeah.
So women have, like I said, women have been trying to deal with undesired pregnancy and controlling their fertility from we realized that we could do something about it, right? So throughout different cultures, different societies develop their own rules for how that works, and whether it was punishable, whether it wasn't, whether it was a matrilineal society or a patriarchal society, and all these other things, and all these societal and religious-based things started creeping up, and and so we evolved and we moved forward. Social things happen, and then we hit slavery, and one of the prime directives of slavery came about when the 3/5 law was passed. And this idea.
The 3/5 law.
Yes.
What is it for people who want to go back, and we're going to talk about slavery and the repercussions of slavery, but before we go into that, the 3/5 compromise, it's also called, I think is often misunderstood. Can you chop that up?
Yes. So when the northern and southern states were trying to divvy up the electoral college and to award the different states with the capability of how they would vote, southern states wanted to count their slaves. Northern states wanted to count their slaves. Southern states didn't, or however way it divides. I could be wrong.
No. If I'm not mistaken,
I'm a medical professional, not a historian. So
if I'm not mistaken, the southern states wanted to count their slaves because that would give them a ridiculous advantage.
So thank you for the correction, because like I said, much more on the medical side than historical. But the compromise that was reached was that slaves would count as 3/5 of a person. And so one of the consequences of that is that it brought attention to, okay, well, what does a pregnant slave count as? Does her fetus count as contributing to that 3/5? Another interesting dialogue that came out around that time was, and this is where it was decided about servitude, and the fact that if a woman was enslaved and gave birth, that her child was also enslaved. It received the status of the mother. As you can imagine, for women who were enslaved, that raised the stakes of pregnancy quite significantly.
Which is why Black American slavery is also referred to correctly as chattel slavery.
Exactly. Because it marked it as very different from slavery in other places like the Caribbean, like in Africa, and in Asia and other places. Because slavery, there was much more like indentured servitude. Your status was that way, and while your offspring may not be of high class or of a different socioeconomic class, they did not inherit the status of slave the way that they did in the U.S. So that ties into the realism that for Black women, that the ability to control their fertility was taken away. And so when breeding programs and these kinds of things came about, all of a sudden, not only could you could not control your sexual egress, you could not control your fertility, you could not control your children, because if you gave birth, they could be sold, they could be taken, they could be killed. So it may, and this is separate from just the health issues related to pregnancy. So you already could die, you already could have, different vaginal prolapse and all these other kinds of things. And now on top of that, the results of it could still be lost. So as we evolved to that, civil rights era came about, all these things come about, and the birth control pill hits the market. Now, recognized for Black women have always worked. There was never a point in American history where Black women were not a part of a labor force. Where for many white women, with the first advance of feminism, for some of them, it was the first time they were entering the workforce. So the dynamics were a little different. And this is even separate from the obligations of motherhood that Black women were often forced to do, as far as nursing white children and being a mammy and taking care of other offspring and not being able to take care of their own. So as you can imagine, it made the conversation and the decision around controlling fertility a very fraught thing. Okay. So here we go, we start going through, we get access to these levels of birth control, and all of a sudden it's like, yes, okay, we're good. And then the Moynihan report comes out. And what that was from Patrick Moynihan, the senator. And basically, what happened was there was this examination of, the Black family. And that is where this narrative of, Black women being single parents and having a teenage pregnancy and rah, 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 and all.
Whoa. The Moynihan report, the infamous Moynihan report, it definitely talked about, oh, hey, Brother Jeremy, sorry, there was chattel slavery in the Caribbean as well.
There absolutely was. We're not saying that there wasn't chattel slavery. I'm saying that the volume of the trafficking that happened was much more prevalent in the States. Not that it didn't happen anywhere else, but it was definitely of the New World and New World slavery. And looking at that, the triangular slave trade, it was definitely a marked difference from how slavery was carried out immediately prior. So thank you for the clarification, Jeremy. I don't want to give the impression that somehow chattel slavery didn't exist in the Caribbean. Of course it did. We are colonized just as well, but there are some hallmarks that we were able to escape just because of geography and some other sociopolitical things that unfortunately Black American slaves that were in the mainland of America may not have had access to.
So let's do this real quick, just for those watching who don't know who Jeremy is. This is Brother Jeremy, who well-respected economist, professor, who often stops by to have great conversations. Oops, that's the wrong one. I'm trying to share with you guys. Let's see. A little bit more on why does that keep happening? Are my fingers not working? Let's try that again. There. That's Brother Jeremy. So for anyone who wants to know more about who he is and what contributions he's made to the world and with my little corner of it, he's a man worth listening to. His opinion always counts and the door is always open, Brother Jeremy, if you want me to send you a link, if you'd like to come in. We're not going to have an ugly dog contest talking about who had what.
And like I said, and like I gave the disclaimer before, there are many historians and people who have studied history that are much more qualified to speak to the evolution. I'm just speaking globally, just to kind of give a sense of some of the issues that have trailed into the dialogue. So, I definitely bow to Jeremy's knowledge. Like, I would not extend myself in that regard and die on that hill.
So going back to the road you were on when you talked about how when I said the Moynihan report basically demonized a lot of the problems that happened in Black America with single parenthood, which is a terrible thing, and among other things. The problem with the Moynihan report, which is why it is a cudgel that is often wielded by extremists on both ends of the spectrum, is because
Absolutely.
it gets the information right without context.
Exactly.
It's data,
Exactly.
not information. What he
Yes.
did is he took things that were factually true, but gave no clue as to why that is. So they made single.
No influence, and then offered all these social programmings, and also shaped a lot of health policy, public policy, all even with this considerate lack of context. So it became a weapon, basically, even though it came from, I want to say, let's say, with the best of intentions, but good, bad, or indifferent, without that context, it really did lead to the growth of some health policies that tie into why I feel the way I do about reproductive access.
Now,
Um,
when we say reproductive access, I want to keep it very specific. When we talk about things like that Moynihan report and single parenthood in Black families, where do you see the relationship between that and past or current abortion issues?
so, for example, one of the interesting perspectives that came out of those who read the Moynihan report was this idea that what if you stopped Black women from becoming single mothers, then you would solve all these ills, right? I mean, if you say that it's single motherhood that's causing these things, well, then if you just stop them from being mothers, that should stop the problem, right? Yeah. So what ended up happening was there was a lot of very questionable medical ethics practices that were put into place. And so there were things like, and this was going on as recently as the 70s and 80s, where Black and Hispanic women were being told to go in for pap smears, and they would give hysterectomies without consent, or they would pay women who are struggling with drug addiction and say, okay, well, if you get on these long acting birth control methods, or if you choose to allow us to sterilize you, then we would give you, $500, $600, while they were still actively addicts. It stirred up these very problematic medical and public health policies
Well,
that
well let's
were
let's since you talked about bribery and addict, and as everyone on this channel knows, I love money. Money is the single most important thing in anyone's life. My dedication to learning how to save and manipulate money allowed me a certain level of freedom early in life. Anybody who wants to talk to me about it, you're welcome to come and see me in the chats. Um, do you see that as an attempt at trying to exterminate the brown people or the poor people, or can we not parse those two things?
So this is the issue. If it was truly about poverty, then why was this not offered to poor white women to
So it
to
wasn't. It wasn't offered to the poor white people.
it was not offered to this with this level of deception. So, for example, I will say that for the and if you haven't read it already, read what was it, Destroying the Black Body. It gives a lot of great references to this, but there were a couple of organizations that were paying women, and yes, they did include poor women, poor white women, but the numbers were overwhelmingly Black and brown. And so, considering that, Black women and Hispanic women at the time were like 6 and 7% of the population, if you were truly trying to address poverty, why was this not a wholesale, large scale invested project? Why would you not put these women in treatment first and then offer this as an option? Why would you feel the need to find women who are high on crack and offer them this decision when you know that they're intoxicated? We would not allow anyone else to make big surgical decisions, because at the time, like now, we have laparoscopic hysterectomies, but back then this was a
Whoa, whoa, whoa,
complete.
whoa! I don't know what that means.
Oh, sorry. So now we're able to do hysterectomies that are not full cavity open, carving out the inside kind of surgeries. But back then, this was major surgery. This was general anesthesia, cutting into the abdomen, taking out all reproductive organs. So paying somebody $500 when they're high on crack to do that just does not seem ethically sound. And that's just how I feel about it. We are not allowed to do that currently. If a patient comes into the hospital and even if they need a surgery, they have to be sober and competent to provide consent. So the idea that this was the best way to address the outcome of poverty, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. So that's kind of where I come from with that. And so I say all of that to say.
Is that the book you're referencing?
Yes. Oh, excellent book. And very well cited. And it's one of those books that even if you disagree with some of her premises, just seeing the historical facts, seeing the documentation, and she includes all her resources, so you're able to trace it back and read it yourself. So I count on it as a reference for those reasons. Because I do believe everyone should be diligent, like, dig through, read the history, read the studies, see what's out there and learn it for yourself and make up your own perspectives. But that was what truly shaped a good amount of my perspective on this issue. And so when we talk about access to reproductive access, when we talk about healthcare and we talk about these decisions being made, understand in America, we have a long-standing tradition of taking away women's options as in regards to their own body. And, and so because of that, you cannot separate the mechanisms used to control abortion from that. Because if it was just a moral decision, we allow the space for all kinds of people to make moral decisions. Some choose that, it's immoral to get divorced, so they don't. They just stay married.
I can tell you of a true story about someone whose name I can't remember. It was a doctor who was servicing people in one of the sub-Saharan African countries, very poor. He was an American-trained doctor who went there, and he was basically helping villages. And that was his calling. He went out, helped villages. And the number one health problem, because he wrote about this, and I'm trying to remember where I read it, because it was in a post that referenced the book. He wrote about one of the most tragic things that he had seen were 14-year-old girls who had been married off, pregnant by 14 and a half or 15, and their bodies were just ripped to pieces. And he did something, we don't know how long he got away with it, that was horribly unethical. Mm-hmm. He was secretly giving them Depo-Provera injections to stop them from getting pregnant.
Right. And yes.
And when people found out what he did, of course he lost any credibility he had.
Yep. Because you were drugging children, and he thought it was the lesser of two evils to drug them, as opposed to, feeling that he could not do anything to stop the sexual assault from happening. And
it was tragic because he said, "I did."
So this is why I say, this is why I tried even when we started the conversation to say there are moral directives. There are things that people feel very strongly morally, but what you can do ethically is different. And
moral ethics are sticky business.
That's where the rubber meets the road, is that sometimes that we do these things and there are ethics and there are legal and socio-political realities that should be and must be considered separately from the moral question.
Yeah, there were so many other issues to unpack with that. And he said two things. He said, I deserve to be stripped of all my accolades. And he said, I still don't regret it.
Because he was following his moral directive. And that's fine. But you don't get to make those decisions for people.
But he said that when he saw these children in life-altering situations because they were not women, they were little girls
They were
being
girls.
impregnated, and
Yes.
it can
By
do
grown men.
irreversible damage to you.
By
And
grown men. So
yeah,
let's unpack that. So you were giving these girls these long-ranging hormone treatments without
right,
any knowledge and consent, without any knowledge of what impact that may have on their fertility and their reproductive development.
right.
But you don't sneak around and give vasectomies to the men who are impregnating them, even though it is a 30-minute procedure. So it's so this is kind of what I'm saying. Like, even when we look at how we intervene with things that are happening, the decision was made to victimize again these young girls, as
Whoa, whoa, whoa,
opposed.
whoa. While I will concede that what he did was wrong on every level, I
Uh-huh.
cannot say that he victimized those girls.
Let me tell you why I call it victimization. If he had even had one conversation with these girls, even one, to say, hey, this is horrible that this is happening to you. I can give you something so it doesn't happen. I want it.
Well,
He
okay,
could
I'm
have
going to
did
say something. I'm going to say something that a lot of my friends are going to come after me for, and as long as we can have a reasonable discussion about it, that's fine. I can tell you there are many different sects. As an atheist, I can tell you I've observed many different sects of religion, and I know that some are good and some are bad and some are idiots and some aren't, although all of them are fantasy and fake.
Mhm.
He was in a position where the fact that people were even using healthcare on a girl child was the greatest accomplishment in their society. The concept of him being able to actually have a conversation with that girl and ask her opinion about something would be the equivalent of, essentially, it would be a miracle. It was not a situation where he even had that as an option. I can tell you, I have seen men from those parts of the country that have had to adjust socially to situations where you don't just hit your wife. Now, that's not exclusive in any way to Islam. What I am telling you is that there are certain cultural traits that people from certain areas carry.
I
I had a
understand.
conversation about I had a conversation about a woman that I wouldn't hit from Russia with a Russian friend of mine. That's a whole different traumatic experience. And for him to be able to have a conversation with that girl about what was going on
Mhm.
would have been so next level to have been, it was preposterous. It was preposterous to him that in that society, their progress was letting the girls go to a doctor.
And hear me. I am not saying that that is not the case. What I'm saying is, even though the circumstances were bad, I still feel those young girls were victimized because they were not even given the opportunity, because he decided that opportunity didn't exist. So I'm not, so just like the other decisions that he made, recognize that he made it from a place of feeling that he knew better, and he operated from within
And
that
here's
realm.
the difference. What you call a feeling, he calls medically evident and soundly based in what he was witnessing every day. He witnessed
And
his
I understand
children's
that,
bodies
but
being torn to pieces.
every doctor has a conversation with their patient. For
I
for
agree with you.
the idea that he could not have, that he could not ask the girls a question, I'm just skeptical. I'm not saying it's
Do you really
impossible.
believe that a
I'm just saying
15-year-old girl
I'm
in that situation
skeptical.
could even say that anything her husband did was something that she was not okay with?
I'm I'm saying that I am skeptical. If he said that he attempted to ask, but because he saw the dynamics, like I said, I would need more information in order to take that off the table.
If
But just
anybody,
going on
if
its face.
anybody wants to research that and pull that information or give me a similar story, I'd appreciate it. I always have to stop back and say hello to Raining Woman. She's always
Yeah,
here to lend her support and her voice, and I would appreciate her. And so on that point, we'll have to agree to
we
disagree.
can. We can. Is I am very protective of younger, because I have seen, because of my background as a provider, I've seen a lot of providers use the excuse of cultural restrictions or gender restrictions to not even attempt And so it makes me very skeptical when I hear
Well,
these examples,
we
because it happens even now. It
there
happens
is no,
current.
but there is no absolute end of that spectrum. Both of us can be right to a degree. You can be right that
Absolutely.
maybe should have tried, and I can be right that in the situation he was in, trying could have cost those girls more than,
Yes,
and
we absolutely can.
it
We
also
absolutely
plays into our sex and gender roles. I can tell
Mhm.
you, as a man, our default setting, and by the way, modern men, we've learned to deactivate this setting over time because it's not going to help us anymore. You learn, help the woman. She's in a problem, you fix the fucking problem. Now, to be fair, we are coming at it from developed
One
countries.
day quarterback, right? We
Yeah,
are. That's what I'm saying.
with
We
clean
have
running
the
water.
luxury.
With
Yeah,
clean
I'm
running
not gonna
water.
say it's water.
So, what is your cocktail tonight? Because I didn't notice. Because you like to get high while you're talking and drink your little cocktail.
Listen, hey, how you doing, Raymond woman? Yeah, today it's actually passion fruit juice mixed with a blood orange and mint vodka. How cool is that?
Wow, you're one of those classy lushes.
No, because lushes don't always shower, and I shower every day. Thank you.
I think you just made that up to feel better about yourself.
Listen, we got to do what we got to do.
And so, and so, like we said, we're armchair quarterbacking because the concept of these things, we're in developed nations with clean running
Right.
water and
Absolutely.
choices.
Absolutely. And we have no idea as to the brutality that was happening, the dynamics of the children involved. So, I'm not about to try to like dig up his grave and light fire on it. I'm just saying that good,
Right.
bad, or indifferent, we have this history and this tradition of providers making these decisions based on what they feel was the best decision for whoever their patient was, and not always checking in, and not always giving all the options, and not always even brainstorming to see, is there another option? And so knowing this and having that knowledge, good, bad, or indifferent, what I'm troubled by is the use of legislation now to enforce, to take these structures and these rights away, when we know we have a history where we have taken away the rights of people to exist as humans, to control their bodies, to control their movement, to control where they could live and how they could breed and who they could marry. And so the idea that we're going back to that, and once again attempting to use laws directed straight towards the control of your own body and your own fertility, in light of that history, is deeply troubling to me.
I agree. Can we make some very high-handed, repugnant decision that we're going to just say for fun, right? When you look at, well, let's do this. Let's go to the Moynihan report. What he said about single mother homes. As someone who worked in the financial business for many years, I can tell you that one of the common things you can look at is if a couple or a woman has a child that was not planned on out of wedlock, it's one of the fastest ways to guarantee you'll be poor. It can actually take someone who is not poor and make you poor, because most people don't really understand the cost of childhood. And this is gone.
And our culture does not support pregnancy and childbirth, like financially at
When
all.
you say our culture,
American, the socio-political status in America, there is really no financial support around childbirth. So it becomes a deeply financial decision.
it's it's deeply financial, and when you realize the unfairness of the financial burden on Black and brown people, specifically Black families who bear the, dare I say, shameful fact of saying, I think the most conservative estimate is 70% of Black children are born single parents, born out of wedlock. And that has nothing to do with whether or not the religious aspect is there, but anyone who works with money can tell you, and I'm not going to speak for economists, but I would love for Jeremy to give his opinion. A man who marries a woman is making a clear demonstration that I'm going to take care of her and the kid. But a man who gets a woman pregnant without being married is essentially saying, I really don't care about you. Because there's one thing that men understand. We all understand how we look at women who have children who they didn't have a husband for. When a man gets a girl pregnant, he understands what he's doing to her. Not doing to her. She's not a victim if she's an American woman, but he understands the consequences. And there's no way he's going to be there for that. And so when you see something that in every other community is considered abhorrent, accepted because it's common, it's painful.
Yeah, and I think that one of the sad things about when people talk about that number of children who are born outside of matrimony,
Mm.
you know, the part that makes it very difficult is for many women, that was not necessarily the pathway that they wanted. There are
I,
many.
I don't know that women have children out of wedlock that wanted to do it. I know of one or two in my own
Right.
personal life that had.
And that's the part, I think that's the part that makes when we talk about single motherhood and single parenthood, because, I feel like there are definitely single dads out there that sometimes, but I don't think anyone, there's very few people who say, you know what, let me go on this whole journey that I know can be emotionally laden, financially burdensome, and let me do it by myself.
Yeah.
Most people
And
and
that's where,
human beings are social creatures. So, think about it like that, like the fact that families have existed for centuries, and this idea that you only had this one person to help you rear this little human is relatively a modern idea. Children were things that were seen as something that the collective invested in to develop, to grow that group. You know what I mean? So that even the movement away from that and into this dual individual nexus, that's a very modern, when you think about the span of human development. And so to think about how difficult it is to narrow it from a cluster of people to two individuals, and now you're going to narrow it to one, like that's a lot. That's a lot.
well, I remember having a friend. Excuse me. I have a friend who had a major falling out with his family. You see, his daughter got pregnant while she was still she hadn't graduated college yet, and the falling out with the family wasn't with the daughter. If they looked at him as he was some sort of a savage for saying, you will have an abortion or I'm throwing you out and don't ever come and talk to me again. And he stood by this because he said what every other adult knows but never wants to say is that her having a child this early in life is going to destroy her life. Unfortunately, so many other people in our community, in his community, he was saying, have done it that they don't really even see it as that bad. But because he and his wife didn't go down that path, and neither did their parents, he knew the difference. And people hated him for that. Some still do. But you know what? His daughter did it. It was horrid. It was not a decision taken lightly, but she had a chance at life.
I think that my concern is that people come to the decision to give birth or not to give birth, or to be fertile or not to be fertile, and it is an intensely personal decision. It has so much to do with what you want, who you are, how you want to live, your values, your body, your health, your family, your support, your loved ones, your hated ones. Like it is intensely personal. So the idea that we would use the courts or use statutes to take that decision away from someone is such a dark place to me. I am a person that believes that one of the primary, almost a prime directive, if you will, is autonomy, the right that you have to your own body. And it is what makes issues like rape so vitally.
Okay.
Like,
Now let's do this before we go down that path. I want to do two quick
Mhm.
things. I want to
Sure.
point out what Rating Woman said. It's okay to drink some water because she's shy about drinking on camera. People know I have my bottle of water, my tea, my coffee. It doesn't matter. And BMT stopped by. And here's something I want to point out. BMT, Black Male Talk, has a great YouTube channel. He talks about things. Let me tell you why so many people enjoy watching him. He's not out there trying to throw dollar bills in the air and tell everybody how great and he talks about everyday grown man talk. So what I would say is because there's room for everybody.
Mhm.
I hope everybody goes to his channel and hits that subscribe button. He's got tons more than I do, and I'm hoping I can give him some more because he deserves it. He's out there doing hard work, talking about families, what it's like to be a dad, what it's like to be a husband, what it's like to grind out your own career. And a lot of people don't want to hear that, but you know what a lot of people do. And I suspect that the people watching here, I suspect you'll appreciate talking to them.
Cool.
And what did Miss V say? A lot of these young girls do get pregnant on purpose. They think children are accessories. Does that go? Does that go?
What's interesting about that is that teenage pregnancy has been steadily decreasing since the 50s. Like, people, I'm like, the vast majority of birth that's happening here are not teenagers. They're not young girls. The average age of birth now is something like 26. I think that now, are there children who are making some real reckless fertility decisions? Absolutely. They've been doing recklessness since the dawn of time. I think a main part of raising children is getting them to survive through adolescence.
we ended up going back to something. We need to talk about the difference between information and data, because the data says teenage pregnancy has been going down. What does the information say for people who look like us?
That it has been going down. That's what I'm saying. Like, the narrative that is out, what is put forward in public policy. I'm like, this is why the National Institute of Health has not put out a disclaimer for adolescent pregnancy in like 7-8 years, because it is not the pervasive driver that it was perceived to be at one point. Like, there is this very solid narrative that that Black girls are just in these streets, just pregnant, and I'm like, in reality, that is not the case. We have pockets in this country that do not have comprehensive birth control, that do not have access to low cost or free healthcare for women and girls. And so, yeah, you'll see some areas in America that still have some really high populations. But if you look at the overall population of brown and Black girls, they are actually having less children.
So we're doing better. Excuse me, we're doing better.
In that regard, if you see it as some don't all, not everyone sees it as a good thing, but I will say that the percentage of children doing that, like, it is definitely decreasing. It is not even a third of what it was. But now I will say, one of the interesting things about, modern media is that you'll see these stories of, let's say, a group of girls having a birth pact or, something like that. And then it just captures the imagination for a minute. And then people start thinking that, oh, wow, it's this epidemic of, adolescent birth happening. But that's not the case. And hasn't been for quite a few years.
Whoa. Can you read that?
Ooh, yeah. Wow.
BMT just said, for the people who may not be able to see it, I had a woman get a backdoor abortion behind my back. I replied to her if she thought my child was a hindrance, just give him to me and leave us be. Okay.
So that is another fraught conversation. And BMT, I'm sorry that.
Hold on. Context.
Oh. So she was 17. So she wasn't really a woman. She was a girl. So a girl had an abortion behind your back.
So having said that, and BMT, after what I say, if you want to come up to discuss this further with us because you're open with that, that's fine. If she was 17 and you were 19, and I hope this doesn't cost us our friendship because I have a great deal of respect for you, I'm glad she did it. I am 100% glad that 17-year-old girl didn't have a baby and that at 19 she didn't give you a baby. I support her decision 100%. On a lighter note, good evening.
It's a tough one. I mean, and that's the thing about, like, I feel for him because I know, that he it obviously caused him significant pain, and I'm sorry for that, BLT, because I would not want anyone to have an experience that makes them feel that way. However, it's, women don't necessarily, there's this idea that a woman chooses to have an abortion because a child is a hindrance, and I don't know if that is fair and accurate. I think that pregnancy comes with a host of risks. And I'm not even talking the financial burden, the threat to your educational pursuits or your career pursuits, because that's piece of it. That's a part that I think Yusef is definitely invested in. However, am talking about the fact that maternal death is a thing. It is a thing. And so there are plenty of women and plenty of girls who decide not to have a child, not because the child is a hindrance, but because they are rightfully concerned about what that means for them biologically.
Well. Here's the thing. Hold on. Here's the thing. With BMT talking about him being 19 and her being 17, I don't think they were thinking that far down the road. I think at 17 she realized me having this baby would put us on a path, meaning the child, and she and the child at least, would put them on a path of most likely poverty, but at the very least hardships in life that no child of 17 should have to go through.
I don't dispute that. However, I will say that as somebody who has worked with and in public health and as a therapist to those same teams, I would tell you, you'll be surprised at how many girls, because of the experiences that they've had in just finding a gynecologist and trying to navigate the world of healthcare, because realize that for girls, we access healthcare earlier than boys do. Do you see what I'm saying? Because, from we start menstruating, the clock starts ticking for us to get pap smears and checks and birth control and all this kinds of something. So we get into healthcare and see that from a age that many boys are not having a similar. Many people don't take their sons to the doctors as religiously and faithfully as they do their girls once they start menstruating.
You're right.
And so I'm saying, like, there are quite a bit of young women out there who are, and rightfully so, and sometimes who are very concerned about what pregnancy would mean for them physically.
Let me go to the comments real quick, because James Cole said two things that I want to address. He said, one, so ellipses, it's grown women deciding to have children out of wedlock, and then he came back later and he said he's touching on male productive rights. And then what I believe is a reply here: yes, grown women are having babies out of wedlock because we have a time clock, a biological time clock. So some of them are deciding to have kids and raise them themselves since they're not married.
The average age of marriage has been increasing. Like, she's not wrong. And we do, and that is another element of the conversation. It does, when we talk about reproductive access, we do definitely tend to veer on the side of women, simply because the physical cost of pregnancy is not divided equally. The experience of pregnancy and birth is not shared in that regard. And so, that is another conversation that does need to happen, is how do we balance the needs and the involvement of someone who contributed to the state of pregnancy and fertility, while still recognizing that they don't necessarily bear the same burden.
And let me pause the show for a second just to get at something that, as a result of some of the things that I've done in different countries, my website here, I get a lot of emails from men just talking about life. Some of the things I'm able to advise them on, but I'm honest about things that I can't. Some take me on as a mentor, some don't. Gentlemen, wear a condom every time you have sex until you say, hey, I want to get this girl pregnant. Always work under the assumption that you are going to shoot a hot, creamy one on this chick and she's going to get knocked up tonight. Just work on that assumption, because if you're wrong, your whole world comes tumbling down. And I say this also, especially to the men. A lot of the men who tend to talk to me are generally men who have something going for themselves. They're generally men that they've got something going for themselves and they have something to lose. Those guys, you got to be, and if you have nothing, you probably won't have anything if you go out there and decide not to use a condom. It's not just about diseases and things like that everybody wants to tell you, oh, these people, diseases aren't that rampant. I don't care. My biggest fear when I grew up was having a child, and it saved me. I actually have an article that I did, and it was called, what was it? There. Children, narcotics, and liquor. 3 things I avoided that helped me become successful in life.
It's so interesting that you bring up that point, because one of the things that I try to encourage the men that I meet and that I talk to is that one of the strongest proponents for male reproductive rights is male-centered birth control. And it is not a coincidence that there are so few male-centered birth control options that are on the market, many of which are successful and do work and have been held from the market out of a quote unquote perceived lack of desire from men to want to control their fertility, or from this perception that, well, men won't tolerate the side effects. And they've actually had some studies close to market where, where they had more than 10% dropout because they broke out with acne, or they noticed mood changes. And, I had to chuckle because, as a woman who goes through most of my life dealing with that, I was kind of like, that's it? Toughen up, man, toughen up. But I say that because, it is a powerful thing to control your fertility, a powerful thing. And it's powerful for men and women. And I think that instead of having the conversation with women as to, okay, well, if you get pregnant, I want to say, there may be a better investment of your time and energy to look at the various providers of healthcare and say, why haven't you given me more options? You can give me a pill to make my dick erect, but you can't give me something to control my fertility. Like, that is a demand that has to come from men.
I'm on your team. Listen, let me do something real quick. I'm going to do 2 things because BMT just gave us some more context. I'm going to go back to the first thing he said, and I'm going to put that on the screen, and we're gonna go down the list to get to where he is now. And by the way, BMT, check your email. I sent you a link just in case you want to join. The first thing he said was, I had a woman get a backdoor abortion behind my back. And by backdoor, do you mean illegal or just secret? I replied to her that if she thought my child was a hindrance, just give him to me and leave us be. But then you gave us the nuance and the context that she was 17 and you were 19, at which point I said, I'm glad that she did it. Totally support that decision. But then you said something, and this is where, for us to go any deeper on this, I have to insist that you be here because I don't want to be unfair in a one-sided conversation. You said, I was in trade school, Job Corps, and she was a party girl who loved the streets. She didn't want to be slowed up. I had secured a place, a job for us both in a car. Irony was, she got knocked up by another man. Let's go to that first sentence. And this is where you and I as men, and the women are more than happy to comment on it, although their opinion on this matters a lot less to me. You and I as men have to look at each other and say, okay, she was a party girl who loved the streets, yet you still put your dick in this girl. That's us as men fucking up. At 17, she was a party girl, but she wasn't stupid. She knew, hey, I don't want this kid. This is where we have to keep having those conversations with each other as men, specifically older men to younger men who are still in this stage in life. Think about it. You know, as excuse me, as Tony Maceo, who I can't believe I'm about to quote this dude. Oh my goodness, how far have I fallen? As Tony Maceo would say, and that, what I'm going to say is very belligerent and gendered, but I mean it. He says, well, some are for marrying and some are for sampling. The girl that lived and partied in the streets, really? You would do more than sample? Sex and relationships with power and strategy. Tony Maceo is also called Power and Strategy. If you really want to get your doors blown off in a conversation, I want y'all to go back and listen to this. Yeah, that's a whole kettle. Excuse me. Precious says, we are usually the ones, female, to get stuck with the kids, so deciding not to have children if they don't want to be solely responsible is smart. I throw my hands in the air in agreement. Now, to be clear, when Precious said, yeah, grown women are having babies out of wedlock because we have a time clock and a biological time clock, some of them are deciding to have kids and raise them ourselves since they're not married. James Cole said that sounds selfish.
Yeah, having a little human that you're putting out in the world because you want to see your genes like keep going, that's selfish. Like we're allowed to be selfish. Like I don't, you know.
This is where it gets ugly, though, because this is where it gets ugly. Should she not have the right to do that?
I mean, you know, and this is the thing, like, I feel like being selfish gets a bad rap. I really do. Because, you know, our first obligation is to ourselves. Our first obligation is to our happiness, to our health, to our bodies, to our family. Our first obligation is to ourselves. So, yeah, you should consider your needs and your body and your life when you're choosing to give birth. I mean, I understand that, you know, some people feel like birth should be altruistic, but I'm sorry, I don't believe that any endeavor in which I could die is something that I'm gonna do for a reason that's not for myself.
Do you well, first let me go back.
That's my personal thing, though. That's not, you know, that's not anybody else. That's my own personal perspective.
Marvin, I want to say hi to Marvin.
Hi, Marvin. Oh, you're in Cali too. Hey.
Marvin, did you hear some of the just disrespectful jokes that was going on earlier about your state of California? You get to watch from the beginning, but thank you for
talking smack, Marvin. He was talking smack about our sunshine.
And just like you and everybody else, I hope you click the subscribe button. That's what I ask for. Click the subscribe and click the thumbs up and share it somewhere. Share it on your, and I always say the same thing, share it on like Facebook or Twitter, or more importantly, share this link on your Tinder profile and say, if we can't have a conversation this deep, we can't fuck. Sorry.
Listen, people underestimate the importance of liking who you fuck. I think so many of the world's ills could be solved if people only fucked people they actually like.
I don't know. By the way, I'm just going to revel in some flattery here. Thank you, Joseph. When will the father ever have to say so? The child is his seed and also is with the lineage of his forefathers. Love the show. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, we have an addition. Hello.
Hey, what's up? What's up? What's going on, guys?
We're good. How are you this evening?
I'm all right.
Awesome. Good to hear.
Yeah, it's good to hear. So, all right. So, I believe we're going into context of the show, what I put. So I've already covered over abortion, over multiple different stuff. as well as adoption and different other things that go on with doctors, lawyers, as well as I think a woman. Shout out to Marina case. She owns a adoption agency in Africa. She's pretty successful, so she's been adopting children. As far as it goes for me and the young lady, I don't regret what I did because I was out there running the streets just like she was. For a man, you can't serve two masters. You can't be in the streets and also be raising a home. It doesn't work. You can't. It's already hard enough to run a career, but also build a family. So I chose, unlike some of my other predecessors, I'm going to stop what I'm doing. I've already lost one kid already into the streets. The mother and the child were both murdered. They were shot dead in the club at 8 months pregnant. So this time I said, the hell with being in the streets. I will actually go to Job Corps. Instead of I would go pick up a trade, get a skill. I was picking up plumbing. I was pretty far in. I've already found a master that was going to take me in, because you already know when you pick up a trade, you're going to go in as an apprentice. So before you can do that, you got to go get your skill set. And I already had it set up. I've already had it set up with her. I said, listen, you can't be out there in the streets with our kid. You know, we're not moving to Section 8. We're not getting the housing and everything. I understand what Yusef is going at about, hey, you picked that girl. And I did. I own up to that. I'm not faulting Yusef as saying it, because I do tell men accountability. And that is an accountability part on me, but I chose that woman that I laid down with. But in the same sense, I also understand that if one parent says that they rather take the child, I get it. Yes, I do not. I understand for women, it is your body. So I'm never going to take that from y'all. However, if the man does tell you, just give me my kid, honor that. Just honor that. He's not right. You can write it out. You can get it signed with the state. You can get it signed by the court that y'all will not proceed for child support or anything like that.
Actually, I don't think you can. I don't think you can actually. I don't think. I don't think anyone can sign away the right to pursue a biological parent.
No, you can do that. No, you can do that. That's the thing about it. It's been done before. Like I said, I help fathers do this. You can literally sign away, like a father can literally sign away his biological rights to the mother. So it can be done vice versa for the mother to sign away her biological rights of, listen, I don't want nothing to do with this baby. I don't want you to bring up this baby. It's no different than a surrogate. Once you do that, is it. Actually, for a child can emancipate themselves at the age of 14. These are things that if you look them up, you can literally do these things. So me talking to her about that, because like I said, I had time to contemplate on this. I had a lot of things to contemplate. What could I have done? Like I told her, if you didn't want the baby, if you didn't want my son, you could have literally have given me my son. I didn't want shit from you. I would have struggled by myself. We would have figured out how to do it. You know what I'm saying? I knew how to get on food stamps. I had aunties and people that said, I understood that I was going to go through my strugglation, but it was going to be me and my kid. But I got cheated out of that. So what I decided on doing, and that's the thing about it, it's very awkward, especially in the States, to see a man say, just give me my damn kid. I don't want nothing to do with you. But there are men now that you're starting to see, and I agree with the sister, that some men, contraceptives work to go a whole lot of way. Have dick control, excuse my language. You got to have some kind of discipline. But also, ladies, if you don't want that child, if you got angry, if you got postpartum, whatever you're going on, hit up the father, hit up the grandparents, say, listen, I can't do this. I don't want to be put in that predicament where I hurt this kid. Get him to the father. Let him be. Sign over your rights. Tell that to the courts. Chalk it up to a payment, like a car payment. Don't see nothing more, and hollow your heart to that. I know that sounds gritty, but I'm being as real as I can. Like I told
BMT, if I could interject.
Go ahead.
One, I'm so sorry for your loss. losing a spouse and a child is a horrible thing, and so I just wanted to express how sorry I am that that was your experience. Okay? Um, the second thing I wanted to say is that you're absolutely right when it comes to having the ability to sign away parental rights or to pursue adoption and to do those and to pursue those legal things. You're absolutely correct that those are options. Okay. I think, however, that there's two different pieces of the conversation. So
Right.
it's the decision to have an abortion is about not wanting to carry a pregnancy to term, not necessarily just a matter of not having a child. Because if that was the case, then women wouldn't give up children for adoption. Do you see what I'm saying? So for a woman, it's two decisions that you're actually
Right.
making. You're deciding not only do you want to be a mom, but you also have to decide, do I want to carry this fetus to term? Okay.
Yeah. Right.
So two different decisions. So when you're talking about parenthood, when you're talking about motherhood, you're absolutely correct. If I carry that child to term, I can function just as a surrogate, just as you said. I can sign away my maternal rights. I can have you formally adopt a child. I can get on child support. I like to joke with my friends that I was like, yo, if I was able to knock up a man, I would still be on child support. I'd have been like, I'll pick it up for weekends and holidays, like, you know,
Yes.
but that's a separate question. That's a separate conversation, a separate answer. Okay.
Well,
Because I do believe that if you carried a child to term and you want to have a conversation about parental rights and what role does a father play and how we discuss issues like child support and custody and da, 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 I think you're absolutely right. And that's a whole conversation that we can have. But let's talk about the question of reproduction, which is,
Okay.
do I
but
carry
but
this
hold on
child?
one second. Before you go down that road, I want to address something Precious said before we get too far away from her comment. She said, Yusef, I had an abortion because I was sick and I was told it would be me or the child to live, and more than likely I would die. I already had a girl and a boy, mind you. My husband at the time said, have the baby. And I thought, and I said, hell no, did you just hear what the doctor said? But he wanted another kid with disregard for my health.
And I would tell you, Precious's example is actually the most common circumstance of abortion.
I
The
would agree.
vast majority of abortions that take place in America are with women who already have 2 children.
No,
So
that's true.
even the narrative when we talk about it, you know, there's this story that it's either these like freckless young girls or, you know, but I'm like, yes, are there girls who are doing it? Yes. But the majority of women who are choosing to have an abortion are doing so because they already have children, their reproductive method had failed, or there's been some kind of health concern, or their lifestyle doesn't support. Like there's so many different reasons for why a woman will not want to carry a pregnancy to term. And that's why I try to separate the two, because for a lot of men, and I completely understand it, they see the role of fatherhood and they see the fatherhood piece of it being kept from them or taken from them. And that part I deeply sympathize with, but it's a separate conversation. For many women, and I'll speak for myself, I chose not to give birth because I did not want to die in labor. I had dreams, I had inspiration, I had a career I wanted, I was in school, I was college, and I didn't want to die. And so many women I know who, you know, even if they survive, like have nerve damage or had epistemies and all. Pregnancy is not for the weak. Pregnancy is not for the weak. It is not something that you should just do pregnant. Like it does not work that way. And so, and are there women who may decide to have multiple abortions or use abortion as birth control? Yes. But my question has always been, is the alternative better? Is it better to compel somebody to undergo a high risk medical process because we think they should? I mean, you know, that's kind of where when we talk about reproductive access, and I talk about things like social control and those kinds of things, that's the part that I'm talking about, is the fact that the experience of parenthood, of being a mother, and what motherhood entails, is only one piece of the conversation. For many women, it's not this, I don't want to be a mom. For many women, it's I don't want to be pregnant.
That's true.
And that's a different conversation.
Let me go back. I don't want to ignore what James Cole said. He said it's not about her rights, it's about community responsibility. I don't know exactly what you're talking about, but I can say with absolute certainty, communities are built on individuals. And when we don't respect someone's rights, the community just will never succeed. It doesn't matter what we were talking about. You have to respect everybody's rights, because that's what the community is made of. Communities can't come from people who are disgruntled.
And even when we talk about that, and the fact that, like, one of the things that also made me very sensitive about this is, when I was working as a therapist, do you know how many abused children that I encountered because their moms were, or their parents, because it's not just their mom, but their parents were not ready for what parenthood entailed? That they weren't emotionally ready, they weren't physically ready, they weren't financially ready. And I'm like, the ones who bear the brunt of compelling people to give birth when they are not willing, it's the children who are harmed. It is the children who grow up, who experience all of the fallout that happens from when you force someone to give birth, whether you use that force legally, whether you use it emotionally, whether you use it through family influence or religious faith. I'm like, listen, that is not a good place to start the road of parenthood.
Go ahead.
Okay, so my wife at one time, during one of her pregnancies, occurred with gestational diabetes. Okay? So since we're going to be talking on a medical term, and I talked with the doctor. I said, "What can that entail?" Well, if it gets any bad, she could die. And she said, "Well, Josiah, here's what we'll do. I'll do my best." I said, "Listen, we can always create another baby, but I can't recreate you." When I said that to her in front of the doctor, she looked at me stunned, because she knows how I feel about abortion. Okay? So in that impact, she understood. We can always start again to remake another baby. We can always go to counseling. But if I know that this child may kill you, because you are playing 50-50 no matter what. If you have hemorrhaging, bleeding, anything can happen on that table. Then I would rather say we're going to have to cut our losses. We'll memorize the child and keep on and keep it moving. Okay. I'm realistic about that. I understand.
I want to commend you for that. That was really the ability to man up. I know that words weren't easy for you to say.
Right. It was not.
James said something that I want to address. He said these women are always later looking for a father to help with their bastard. Well, that's a coin with two sides. I say you're absolutely right. And then I say to the men watching this show, don't fall for it. One of the worst mistakes you can ever make is coming involved with a woman that has a child. If you guys want to have a separate talk about this later, that's fine. If y'all want to be mad, but I'm encouraging you.
I think that in and of itself is this whole separate show.
Listen, the kitchen is always open to you. You can always buy.
And the reason why I say that has to be a whole separate show is because as a woman of a certain age with no children, the amount of men with multiple children who are casting their nets.
Yeah, but
I'm like, listen. So
you don't have to jump into that.
Right.
You
and so
don't have
this
to jump in.
But this is kind of why I'm saying that I feel like that in and of itself, that little nutshell, like that is a whole conversation.
Then we will, and we'll pin this here. So if anybody wants to pin this,
should be with parents. I don't.
Oh my goodness! I was gonna say this is the point. It's 1 minute and it's an hour and 18 minutes in, so we're gonna start wrapping up. But I want y'all to remember that YusefWateef said and is willing to stand behind. to the men watching, do not ever become involved with a woman that has children. It is a terrible idea emotionally from what I've seen, and it is a terrible idea economically and financially from what I know to be true from my career as a financial professional working with families. I can tell you it will burn you to the ground. We'll talk about that another day. So what I would say when James says these women are always looking for a father, you don't have to say yes. Just because she's throwing it at you doesn't mean you have to catch it. Period. There you go.
I like to say people in hell want ice water.
Yeah.
People want a lot of things, whether you give it to them, that's something else. That's a decision.
You said, not in this misandry world. Let me
that's a loaded term. Okay.
Let me go back, and I want to make sure that everybody understands the technical definition of misandry. Misandry, the dislike of, contempt for, integrated prejudice against men. I would say that there may be misandry against men. However, we still control the world. I mean, the unfortunate reality is women may get mad at us, but they're mad because we create, we destroy, and we make most of the important decisions for ourselves and the women that choose to follow us. And there's going to be some resentment for that. Every woman who has ever loved me resents the fact that I decided I'm the leader of the ship. You can be first mate and you can follow me or not. And then even more resentful when the decisions I made were the right ones. So yeah, misandry does exist. But
you pick it.
Well, let me be clear. Hold on, Suzette. You asked a question. Let me give a clear.
I'm just teasing.
No. I consistently I put my dick on the table early and often. I let everybody know exactly who I am. There are two qualifications to be in a relationship with me. One is loyalty and the other is obedience. What I look for in women is I'm not looking for women who aren't smart enough to be loyal and obedient to an accomplished man. I'm looking for women who are first and foremost accomplished in their own lives, didn't go out and get pregnant, who are educated, who have more for themselves, and then I show them why they should be a part of my world. Kind of like I always use the example of the old anime, the Triple Nine Express. I'm this golden plane going out throughout the universe, right?
Oh, you're pulling out stuff from the crates.
Okay. And at any time, a woman can say, hey, I want to get on the train with you and be with me. 1, 2, 3 women. I've had polyamorous relationships, but here's the problem. You'll never drive because my history, that long train behind me, long before a woman makes the decision to say, I want to get on the train with YusefWateef, she should be smart enough, and these are the women that I tend to choose. She's smart enough to say, I won't let his history be a mystery. I'm going to find out what this guy's about. And more often than not, they say, you know what? I want to be a part of his world. I can tell you the women that I've loved, that have loved me, been back and forth with, they're still a part of my life, and they still have a great deal of respect for me. Because, again, I was a man worth being loyal and obedient to, even when the situations in our lives changed.
Which is it's an interesting dynamic. And it is not one that I denigrate in any way, because I do believe that everyone should have the option to choose. So that be one advocate for absolutely. I'm not a physician, so James is asking that in my role, am I willing to advocate for the creation and availability of male contraceptives? I have been advocating for male contraceptives since I left college. Like that is not at all. And if anything, I have been advocating that, especially for Black men, for eons, because part of what one of the things that I think drives some of the conflict that you see like online and in print media about Black relationships comes from this narrative where men are feeling victimized because there are women who they perhaps didn't choose, or maybe they chose them and things didn't work out, but for whatever reason pregnancy occurred and it either negatively impact their lives or their relationships or their finances or whatever the case may be. And guess what? It's a lot harder to have that kind of animosity, to have that kind of issues from all of the kinds of things to then guess what? We would have a very different conversation about relationships and what you want and who's doing what, because it wouldn't be an accident. You wouldn't have these cases of people popping up with people's children and having, secondary, tertiary families. So I believe every person, male or female, should control their fertility and should have access to the ability to do so.
And I'm with you on
also,
that.
And also to Marvin's point about it, if it wasn't so easy for single mothers to find men, they take pregnancy more seriously. Please understand that for at least from I'll speak from the feminine experience. Pregnancy is almost always taken seriously. It is very rare that it's not, regardless of whether you find a man or not.
I'm going to tell you,
it is a health decision for us,
yeah,
not just a matter of being a parent or being cute down the line. It is a life or death decision that we're making. So I think that there is a false perception that somehow it's trifling for women. And I would tell you for most girls, from the time they have their first period, fertility becomes central to their lives because the people around them make it central to their life.
As well they should if they have good parents.
Exactly.
Now,
So
Marvin,
I don't think that that's the case. Now, if I could say one thing though before we move on, Yusef, before we kind of dealt with some of the comments, for you, the fact that your partners know that for you your primary values are obedience and loyalty, then they have agreed to that. They're knowledgeable about that. So there's no harm, no foul. I think where the problem comes is for myself, I'll say obedience for me looks very different, partially because of my own predilections, and we talked about our similarities in the kink space, and so have a good night, BMT. So it's not obedience per se is not the prime driver the way that it may be for you in your relationships. I think the problem comes when men attempt to denigrate women who may have a different perspective. Like, you can know what you need and know what it is that you want, and there's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to necessarily announce that any woman who doesn't follow that value set, that there's something wrong or flawed with her. It could just be different values, and you could chalk it up to deuces.
Marvin, you say I agree, Yusef. If it wasn't so easy for single mothers to find men, they take pregnancy more seriously. What I would say as a corollary is it will always be easy for a woman who's had 1, 2, or multiple children to find a husband. The problem is not all men are created equal. What women tend to find is the instant you have a child outside of wedlock, you are cut off from that. I'm going to use another loaded term. You're cut out of that talented 10th. The most accomplished among us, black, white, or any other color, we would simply never consider a woman that already had children. It would just be, every woman idolizes Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, right? But let me tell you something. Jackie Kennedy was a woman who was A, married, B, married to a respected man who had children. Then she was widowed and then found another equally successful man to be with her. So she was making good decisions from the beginning. She wasn't some girl that got knocked up and then got pregnant, and then maybe she's looking for another husband later. So women are not getting the best men. The problem is they don't know that until afterwards. And it breaks my heart to tell you, I've had conversations with women that I've known for many years, women who trust me with being discreet. There are people that come to me just to call me and cry about, well, how did this happen? Because they find out it doesn't matter how youthful and beautiful you are. Once you had that child, all those men with a future that can provide, they can do what they want to do in life, they want families, you're no longer a woman who we would ask for her phone number from. She's stuck with those B, C, and D level men because she had a child outside of wedlock before. And that's something a lot of women don't realize until it happens, because we as men, in one of the few times we choose to be kind rather than right, we're not telling them. We'll talk about it amongst ourselves. They find out the hard way. Sister Suzette, your face betrays you.
Yeah, I like to tell people I play spades, not poker. I'm you know me well enough to know I'm not one to speak against somebody's lived experience, and you know your circle much more depth than I ever will. I don't know if I completely co-sign on that, because I do believe that circumstance and context matters. I do believe that there is a difference between someone who made a incorrect partner choice,
right?
And versus someone who is making reckless, life decisions and just kind of haphazardly.
I'm not talking about a woman who was divorced with children.
No, you're
Having
talking
been as foolish as what I'm saying is no man should come into a woman that already has children. Okay, that's a bad idea. Miss V, you're right. There is a double standard. Unfortunately, the world we live in is not a nice nor fair one. And when he said not so easy for single mothers to find men, they take pregnancy more seriously. Well, a woman who was married when she conceived her child was a different situation. But the reason you can't co-sign on what I'm saying, and I'm glad you can't co-sign on it. See, you haven't made that mistake, so you don't know how cold it is out there. None of the women in this circle want to do this.
That is a fair point. Like I am speaking from a place of privilege, in that I am child free, so I don't.
You practice that. You practice vaginal maintenance to make sure you didn't get any unwanted occupants.
Listen. Yeah, and even that, like, sometimes I don't think that men realize, like, to actively not have children, like that in and of itself is a financial and health investment. Like, birth control is not cheap, abortions are not cheap, like this is a serious, when people say, oh, they don't take pregnancy seriously. Do you have any idea what the copay is for prenatal visits? Do you know how much prenatal vitamins cost? Listen, and so I say that to say that for the women that I know who have had children, there are some who Yusef, you may have a point, that may struggle in the dating world. There are others that I see who have had wildly successful relationships with successful men, with their children intact. So I think that I see enough variance in people that I wouldn't necessarily throw it out the door.
Well, how about this? Let's say I'm only right 50% of the time. That should incentivize any woman watching to not fuck it up.
I would advise women to know that anytime you choose to have a child, it is going to impact every section of your life, every section. And that includes your dating life. So, and your relational life. And that's just a reality of having children. So, that's kind of why I was saying that conversation, I think I'm just not equipped to be a participant. And I think it has to come from other women who have had children so that, they can speak from their lived experience.
Yeah, but none of them are gonna openly talk and say, yes, my dating prospects took a shit now that I have a child.
I don't know. I think you'll be surprised at how forthcoming women can be. Because I will tell you that there's a reason why some women choose to have children, and after they've had one child, if they want a second one, to just have them and to live their life and to move forward for that very reason. I'm like, marriage as an institution is declining for a variety of reasons, and I think that might be one of them. That where the expectation was that after, if you were divorced or widowed, that the expectation was that you could and should find someone to fill that role of parent or father to your children and all those kinds of things, and having a social space for that has changed. But people are still going to live. People are still going to live. They're still going to have sex. They're still going to do those things. So it's not practical to think that they would, foreclose if they enjoy motherhood and do enjoy, the experience of children. The idea that they would never do that again because they're not in a relationship, slim to nil.
That's because you're smart, Miss V. Miss V just said, I'm actually leery of bringing outside men over my girls. Don't put any man that's not their father or their uncle or their brother around your daughters. That's one of the fastest ways for something horrible to happen.
Hold on. Not just her daughters. Let us not pretend like there are not threats to male boys as well.
Your children. No outside man or woman should be around your kids. This is a great way to see them get hurt and abused. I've read too many pieces of information that can point to the single greatest indicator as to whether a child will be abused is whether or not there is an adult who is not his parent or her parent in the home.
Unfortunately, that has been a clear indicator for many.
That's clear. That's clear. That's clear for medical professionals. Keep people, and I'm going to go out and I'm listening. I'm going to jump out the window again. Keep people in general, but particularly men, because men are particularly violent. We are particularly ruthless in a way that very few women are. Keep them away from your children. Listen, I got to go. And I wish that we had even more time. I got a job to do.
Huh?
I got a job to do tomorrow, so I can't be up all night. I got a client that needs me.
So what I just want to say, thank you as always. You know, it's always a pleasure getting the opportunity to have these kind of conversations with you, and enjoy All Hallows Night, my friend.
Well, listen, for those who might have just said, but wait a minute, Wateef, I thought you made your money being a successful YouTuber. Clearly I don't, or I'd have more time for it and more viewers, which, because whoever's watching this right now, make sure you click subscribe. I'll show you what I do. I'm an editor, a writer, ghostwriter. I've written things for people that you know. I do proofreading for books, making sure everything is done in university level English. Right now, one of my biggest client bases are people who call me and hire me to write their resumes. Anybody here can connect with me on LinkedIn. What you can do is connect with me on LinkedIn. You can also go down LinkedIn and look at some of, not just my resume, but what I take pride in are my references. And I've had several of my high profile clients be so moved to write references for me and tell the world of my level of professionalism. And I'm proud of that. So everyone's welcome to join me on LinkedIn as well, because if I can help you, great. If you can help me, great. If not, you can pass my information to someone else.
Awesome. And I'll just go through the world making people kinky and having good beverages.
We got to figure out a way to, when do you start your channel? So we can start your channel. We can like put on a private something. When are you going to start yours?
That is a very good question. It is my primary goal for 2020, second quarter 2020.
All right.
My goal. That's my goal.
I love you all and thank you all for showing up. I hope everybody has a great night. Blah, blah, blah. Like, share, subscribe. Talk to you guys later. And Suzette, thank you for singing.